In Two Minds by Alice Hawkins, Teifi Valley Coroner Series, Book 2. Read by Iestyn Arwel. For Edwina. Glossary of Welsh terms. Ngwasi, colloquially, my lad. Gwas bach, literally, little servant, a term reserved for the youngest or most junior servants. Bankereithyn, gorse bank. Tŷ unos, literally one-night house. Tai unos, the plural form of tŷ unos. Crachach, gentry or upper classes. Duw, God. Smuglin, a dockside drinking den where ale was brewed without a licence and smuggled spirits were sold. Betgun, the outer garment of most Cardiganshire working women in the 19th century. It featured a tight, low-cut bodice and a long back, sometimes gathered up into a tail. It would have been worn over a blouse and petticoats with an apron over the top. Mamgi, grandmother. Arglwydd Annwyl, dear Lord. Bara brith, a light fruit cake or tea loaf. Machgeni, my boy. Trist, sad. Hiraeth, a longing for times or places past. Part 1. Harry. Is there any argument more futile than the one with an aged parent? The mere fact that you persist in opposing them simply reinforces their poor opinion of you. This is preposterous, Henry, my father announced. How can you even think of agreeing? I cannot conceive of Pomfrey's suggesting such a thing. Not just Pomfrey, all the county magistrates. A brief, fraught silence. Not so, my father said. There was one member of the bench who was not consulted. I clenched my jaw on the urge to roar with frustration. They couldn't very well make you a party to the discussions, could they? I say, Probert-Lloyd, I put on the exaggeratedly English tones of a Welsh squire, what do you say to your son standing in for Bowen pro tem? Like a terrier with a rat in that business of the Joneses girl's bones before Christmas? Good coroner material, eh? No, as my efforts to discover the truth behind Margaret Jones's death had demonstrated, the qualities that made a good death investigator were not entirely those of a gentleman. And I threw any remaining caution to the winds. However much you fail to conceive of it, the magistrate's purpose could not in fact be clearer. Leighton Bowen is dying, and the county is in need of a coroner. Every member of the bench but you sees that I am eminently qualified to do the job. My father leaned towards me over his desk. Do they know you're almost blind? I resisted the temptation to lean forwards in my turn and meet him, nose to nose, across the desk. Apart from not wishing to give him the satisfaction of seeing that I was provoked, at such close range he would vanish completely into the whirlpool of my peculiar blindness. My sight is irrelevant. What they know is that I succeeded in disproving the inquest jury's ludicrous verdict when nobody else was even prepared to look at Margaret's death. He pulled back as if, in mentioning her name, I had committed a regrettable faux pas. Only he and I knew quite how embarrassing my investigations into Margaret Jones's death might have proved to our family. I glared ineffectually into the blank world that hid his face from me. Was he attempting to stare me into submission as he had done when I was a boy? Failing sight did not confer many advantages, but at least it meant that I was immune to that particular form of intimidation. Harry, why must you insist on behaving as if your faculties were unimpaired? His tone surprised me, sounding almost conciliatory. First there was all that nonsense about becoming a solicitor, and now this. In other words, why wouldn't you stop being so stubborn, learn your duties as my heir, and settle down as squire-in-waiting? I'm not behaving as if I'm unimpaired, as you so tactfully put it. I made it clear to Pomfrey that, my sight being as it is, I'd need an assistant. We've agreed that I will be allowed to appoint my own coroner's officer. By which you mean Charles Schofield's clerk, I assume? John Davies is an ideal assistant. He's observant, discreet, and doesn't need to be told anything twice. It's not his aptitude that concerns me. Do you not see how showing preference for somebody like Davies, valuing him above your peers, will affect your place in society? I fail to see how having John as my assistant shows a preference for him, or how the gentlemen of Cardiganshire can feel themselves slighted by his appointment. My father sighed. One day, Glen Teifi will be yours. Don't make your becoming its master impossible. I rode to Charles Schofield's office through a clear January afternoon, without wind or cloud. Nothing overhead but a fading blue of frosty purity. The beauty of the day should have cheered me, but as I contended with a lingering fury with my father and a growing apprehension at the prospect of speaking to John's employer, my spirits remained anything but cheery. In an attempt to master my mood, I turned my attention to the road ahead and tried to focus on what I could make out. You'll find you become better at perceiving things you would not previously have noticed, my eye doctor had told me. You learn how to make use of your remaining vision. And he was right. Despite the fact that one's peripheral vision is not designed to register detail, I was learning how to interpret the tantalizing sidelong view it offered. The problem was, I was not learning quickly enough. Much of my seeing now depended upon guesswork and familiarity. Anything new was difficult to make out until I was very close to it. I knew this road well, but that did nothing to lift my mood. Everything around me, winter fields, hedges, ditches, leaf-bare trees, even the stretch of the cold brown Teifi away down the bank to my right, belonged to my father's estate, an inheritance and a responsibility I had never wanted, but which blindness seemed to have made inevitable. Until today. The magistrate's request that I become acting coroner for the Teifi Valley held out the possibility of a different future. Unpaid and ad hoc, the office of coroner might be, but if I could secure it permanently, the job would offer independent occupation and a potential escape from the combined exigencies of filial duty and blindness. As coroner, I would no longer be a mere footman to the status quo, standing in wait behind my father, slipping, when the time came, into his warm space on the magistrate's bench, a prospect that was about as appealing as contemplating my own annihilation. What cause does the jury find for the demise of this man? He was stifled to death by gentility. No. Whatever objections my father might raise, I was not prepared to play the docile squireling, not while an alternative presented itself. But if I was to prove myself a credible coroner, securing John Davies as my coroner's officer was essential. John. When Harry walked into Mr. Schofield's office, I didn't know whether to be glad or furious. At last! Where had he been? Christmas had come and gone, then the New Year, then most of January. What had happened to that new beginning he talked about when we'd been working together? That new start in Cardiganshire as a solicitor who needed the right kind of clerk? I'd thought he was better than that, dangling a job in front of a man and then disappearing for weeks on end. Old Schofield stood up as Harry came in, but from the look on his face, I could tell he wished he hadn't. Force of habit, though, isn't it, standing for the gentry? Mind you, Harry's gentility was questionable these days, in Newcastle Emlyn anyway. All that grubbing about after a dead dairymaid, not to mention speaking Welsh like a farm boy instead of honking English up his nose like the rest of the local crachach. I stared at him. He was wearing one of those new Macintosh coats that they advertised in the illustrated papers. Do I have to say any more? About as smart as the seat of a navvy's trousers. Mr. Schofield cleared his throat in a way he probably thought was meaningful, though God alone knows what the meaning was, and he and Harry did the How's the Family and Can You Believe It's 1851 Where's the Time Going dance for a bit. Then finally Harry got round to what he'd come for. I'm afraid it's becoming an unfortunate habit of mine, Mr. Schofield, to come and ask you to indulge me with the services of Mr. Davies. Indulge him? That didn't sound as if he'd come to offer me a job.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?